Thank you for joining me on Let's talk concussion and doing the right thing. I'll try and talk a bit louder today. I had a bit of feedback that I've been a bit quiet on the last couple of podcasts, of shows. So I'll try and talk up. One of the things that I'm increasingly hearing and finding annoying in commentary and also from other places is they're doing the right thing by that guy who's gone off for HIA and being removed. The main reason I've got a problem with this is we don't say, they're doing the right thing by taking that guy off because he's got a broken leg. And we still have an issue with understanding what concussions are and that they are actual injuries. We need to start changing that culture and changing the vocabulary that we get from our commentators, from our pundits, from the players, from the coaches around this. Talking constantly of doing the right thing, it sounds like it's an option, that you could leave the guy back on and it would be okay. And it's absolutely not. Once you've got a concussion, if you get second impact syndrome, that can lead to death. And it's a very dangerous thing to do, to leave a player on the pitch who has had a head injury. One of the places that we heard this relatively recently was when Bath got reduced to 14 men. What happened there was that they had a number of their props were off the pitch due to HIAs, and that meant they had to go down to uncontested scrums. And one of the processes in place to stop people from voluntarily going down to uncontested scrums is to reduce the side down to 14 men. We heard players coming out afterwards saying how they'd been unfairly impacted because they did the right thing by these concussed players. And that's not right. They weren't doing the right thing. They were doing the only thing. There was no other option. You can't be saving people like that. And by the way, thank you everyone. Thank you for joining me. And please do feel free to comment and let me know your thoughts in the Periscope, or if you're on YouTube, please feel free to put the comments below. If you're really watching this on replay on Twitter, again, reply on Twitter and let me know your thoughts. The reason I'm bringing this up is because we heard that during the France-Scotland game, is that the commentators were saying that Scotland were doing the right thing when Barkley and I can't remember the other player who it was were going off for HIAs and being replaced. That kind of language, unfortunately, makes it look like an option, and concussions really are not an option. You just have to look at some of the stuff that Jamie Cudmore's been talking about and various other players who have come out of that and talked about the long-term effects they've had from concussions. So that is one of the things that we really need to stop and change the conversation and the culture around, because there's lots of young players watching this, there's lots of other players, amateur players watching this, who are seeing this and might start to think that it's acceptable and it's an option to stay on the pitch after those sort of things. So please let me know your thoughts. Blue cards for suspected concussions and player cannot return. That's interesting. So it looks like that a move in Auckland is there's going to be a new card called a blue card, which looks like it's a way of symbolising or showing that HIAs are in process and that players are going off to have themselves checked by a doctor. One of the problems if we get below the elite level is there may not always be a doctor available at games for people to go and be inspected and come back on. So even for the suspicion, it is the end of the game for that person. And for a person who's built up all week to play the game and then to be taken off after, say, 5 minutes for the very first contact they make is harsh for them. But obviously the important thing is that the safety of the player and what could happen to them over the next 75 minutes. The worrying thing is that Hardy went off HIA, the French player stayed on. Yes, it's definitely still becoming a much better. We are better than where we were with head collisions. If we look at the Lions tour to Australia and George Smith, for example, who was clearly out on his legs and being allowed to come back on the pitch, we're not seeing that happen anymore. I think that we're actually, or as much anymore. I think it's unfortunately the way we have to say it, because we saw, because there have been some instances, I think there were in the French league prior to the Rugby World Cup, which is just over a year ago, obviously, where there were people there, the player there that went back on who shouldn't have done. And obviously we had Jamie Cudmore's issues over in France, where he got sent back on the pitch because after he'd failed HIA, because the team was down to, they'd lost only had 1 second row. I think one of the answers to this, and it's something that happens in yes, definitely proud of Scotland for the medics for attending to their duty of care. Totally agree with that comment. One of the things that when I talked to Joe Edwards, and he was coming back from a concussion and was still going through the return to play protocols when I interviewed him. One of the things that he told me was that in New Zealand, at the Super Rugby and Mitre Cup 10 level, they have an independent doctor, whereas currently in the Aviva Premiership and over in the UK, I believe, it's still the team's doctor who does the head injury association. It's not head injury assessment. It's not an independent doctor, and I do think that part of the culture change might be help drive the culture change might be putting in and having independent doctors rather than team doctors and key medics who do have a conflict of interest and may feel pressure to get players back on the pitch when they shouldn't do. So that's what I want to talk about today and bring up. Has James Robinson been passed over for Lions because he's too rigorous in protecting players? I have no idea what the... I've not read who is the medical doctor for the Lions this time. I know he's had a lot of praise in the past for his work with the Lions, and I said I've not seen any news as to who it is. I would be very upset if that was the reason that he got passed over. But I say I don't know who has been posted for that. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you for your comments and all the hearts. Please do spread this message, because this is a serious message about player welfare and about players getting off and looking after themselves and quite often making sure they're being protected from themselves. So thank you everybody thank you for watching, and whether it be on YouTube or on Periscope. And I will talk to you tomorrow, and I think might be talking about club ownership, or about perhaps how rugby should be moving forward rather than looking backwards. There are a couple of topics that I'll be talking about over the next few days. Thanks, guys.